These are tears that you don't understand the prayers that has been made. These are tears that has accompanied me through this journey. These are tears of satisfaction, Mr. President. These are tears of joy, Ashley. These are tears that just establish how proud I am to stand before my people. I said to stand before my people. I never read nothing. I usually come right off my cap, but it's a couple things that I wanted to truly establish. I believe that God led me here, not man. I'm gonna say that real slow. I believe that God led me here, not man, because man didn't believe that I was coming. W.C. Gordon, Jackie Slater, Lynn Barney, Robert Brazile, Eddie Payton, the late Walter Payton, Jimmy Smith, and Houston Hoover, who drove me to every game, established a tradition here that I believe that we can reestablish. I believe the men that I sat and looked into their eyes on a Zoom call yesterday can win SWAC championships. I believe the Sonic Boom is the best thing since peanut butter and jelly. I believe that our commitment to excellence academically can continue. I believe that our student enrollment can increase. I believe that the crime in this community could cease. I believe that these young men that we're raising is going to be pillars in the community, not only professional football players, but professionals.
All right, welcome back to the BCSN Sports Wrap, Brian and AD. And this is, of course, the group chat segment that we've been telling you about. Joining us right now from Dr. Cavill's inside the HBCU Sports Lab, the doc himself, Dr. Kenyatta Cavill, and, of course, Charles Bishop, one of the happiest Tigers in Tigerland right now.
That's two of them. That's two of them today, Brian. How we gonna deal with that? We just got done talking to one Tiger. Now we got another one on here. We just can't
Yes,
run.
indeed. Gotta love it.
Exactly. I mean, oh, happy days are here again in Jackson State. So, and so obviously if you haven't had a chance to go back and listen to what was Tuesday night's show, a great show where Doc, Charles, Mike, and even AD joined in on the conversation, probably just a day after the announcement that Deion Sanders became the 21st head coach at Jackson State. That's some good stuff. And, you can find that on YouTube under Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. You can find it on Twitter at Inside the HBCU Sports Lab 1, and also on Facebook. So, I mean, make sure to go back and check out episode 84, if I'm not mistaken, right, Doc?
That's correct. Episode 84. I appreciate that plug.
Yeah. It's funny how
and you need to be careful as a media person. You need to be using Coach Prime now. That's what it is.
Exactly. I've got to get used to that. Coach Prime, obviously. So we have, I mean, obviously there has been a lot of conversation. We've seen a lot. And so what I'm hoping in our group chat is sort of, I told AD, there's some like behind the scenes stuff, things that led up to Coach Prime coming to Jackson State. and then wanted to get into talking a little bit about just some of the reactions of what we've seen, because as we record this, it's been about 48 hours, 72 hours. By the time most of you watch this, it's been towards the end of the week. And so we've had a chance to kind of see the reaction from just the national media. So let me start with just a little background, because I think one of the things that we heard coming into the rumors of Deion possibly becoming the coach was, at the time there was already an interim coach in place. Obviously TC Taylor, who was the interim offensive coordinator, or interim head coach. He was offensive coordinator. And there was a lot of talk that he was going to be the successor and he was going to be the coach. And so after the announcement, it almost seemed to ruffle some feathers, not all, not a majority, but there seemed to be a ruffling of feathers by some as to, whoa, what happened? How does Deion get this position over TC Taylor? And so it had me thinking and wondering, who is TC Taylor, for those who may not know? And I guess I'll start with you, Charles, and kind of say, who is TC Taylor? And, the narrative that was put out there was that he was possibly overlooked for this job, that this was a job that he was perfect for. Tell those who don't know maybe a little bit of background on TC Taylor and just your thoughts. Had Deion not become the head coach, had it not worked out in the negotiation process, would TC Taylor have been a fit that would have been a good fit for Jackson State?
Yeah, I think TC Taylor would have been a tremendous fit. One of the things that a lot of the Tiger faithful know about TC Taylor is he is an extremely bright individual, a meticulous planner. And we interviewed former Jackson State quarterback Robert Kent, and Robert Kent talked about TC Taylor's intelligence on the football field, and he's taking that intelligence into the coaching rank. So if TC Taylor was indeed to be Jackson State's future head coach, I think the Tiger faithful would have rallied in behind him. They love having one of their own sons, if you will, to take the reins of Jackson State football.
What about your thoughts on that, Doc, in terms of just the thought that here's an assistant coach being, as it was spun, overlooked, or sort of, here's a guy who's come from being an assistant coach at a community college to being an assistant coach and offensive coordinator at a couple other HBCUs. He's put in like 14, 15 years of time, and then he sort of skipped overlooked. Is that a fair narrative? That's kind of, I hate to use the word fair, it's one of my least favorite words, but
yeah, no, I understand the gist of that question, and you're right. I don't know if fair is the word we want to talk about, especially on top of what we recently heard about Breonna Taylor. In this life cycle we live in, there's not a lot of things that we can talk about fairness. But I think it is an open and honest critique that we need to look at when you talk about what's taking place. And part of that critique, also in line with TC Taylor, is the fact that he's an HBCU graduate. Jackson State University is alma mater. And so there are a lot of fans that like the idea of having a person from HBCUs, if not even more so alumni, actually heading up the team. And so I think there is a framework about that. But we need to also look at the historical connection about this. I think the resume that is good, and I'm glad that we're talking about TC Taylor, because he needs us to acknowledge that if it's not at Jackson State, somewhere else, because he is primed to become a head coach. He's put in the work in regards to what is necessary. All the way back when he started out as a graduate assistant, coming up the ranks, I got a chance to actually personally meet him at Texas Southern University. And I've been a proponent And when I say a proponent, somebody that is an advocate for TC Taylor to get his opportunity, and I think he will. Went to North Carolina Central, helped them have some significant success there, as we know, North Carolina Central getting to the Celebration Bowl and the kind of success they had under him. But as that was transitioning off, he was looking for a new opportunity, one, whether it's head coaching or the transition there in terms of head coaching changes there. So unfortunately, in a lot of ways, this is the nature of the college football business, that you got to be prepared to move, and it's not subject to your timing. All things have to really line up. You know, you all being in that business know more than anybody that being assistant coach and even getting your chance of head coaching for that matter, you know, there's very few people that we can say that stay at an institution from some, 10 plus years. And in this day and age, that's unheard of. Head coach assistant. So that's part and parcel part of the business. So the last thing I would talk about in this case is we also have to talk about they welcome him home. They also talking about him continuing in the capacity with the team, and the fact that now he has the ability to align himself with another brand, and how that could successfully propel him to his next opportunity. And who knows that he still may come back. And this is all about timing. It may not been just his time, not meaning that he wasn't prepared to be a coach. It may not just been the time. And if you're a spiritual person, since we kind of talk about prime time and what he brings to the table, as we heard throughout his briefing, talking about, I believe, if you're that spiritual person, you need to understand that the timing will come at the right time when you're prepared for it, when you're ultimately ready, and a spiritual framework says that it's time for you.
Any thoughts to add on that, AD, regarding just, you've been in I heard you guys kind of talk about this, about being in a role of being an assistant coach, and sort of going through that process and seeing, how sometimes somebody comes in and it's like you clean house a little bit, or you kind of move away from maybe the more established people who are there. Anything that you wanted to add on that?
Well, number one, on TC Taylor, it is to be noted that he was a part of the staff, the only school not named A&T to represent the MEAC in the Celebration Bowl. He was a part of that staff. That's number one. Number two, does he possibly have a right to be bitter? Yeah, a little bit. Anytime you feel that you're qualified and you get passed over for a job, I don't care if it's a job at McDonald's or if it's a job at Jackson State University, you're gonna feel a little bit bitter. But the big thing is, what does he do with that? Does he frown and get the sour face with those lemons that have just been fed with him, or does he go get some sugar and make him some lemonade out of this situation? Also, talking about that progression in coaching, Deion did something only Deion can do. You really don't see anybody who goes from a high school assistant coach to a college head coach in that one step. There's a natural step of progression. You go from a high school assistant to a high school head to possibly a college assistant to a college head. He skipped to at least 2 steps in the natural progression of that. And usually when you get to the college level, you have to be a coach, then you go to coordinator, then you get the head coach. But this is prime that we're talking about. Some things, your name, your fame can help you progress and skip steps. We just saw with Steve Nash in the NBA. So things happen. So, you know, no knock against TC Taylor, but if you are Jackson State, you've got an opportunity. You've got to roll the dice, because what Jackson State's been doing for the last 7 years hasn't worked. So what they say, insanity is the definition of doing the same thing over and over again. Jackson State can roll the dice with all them 21s that we saw on Monday. Number 21 becoming the 21st head coach on September 21. I thought I was in Tunica, Mississippi there, Charles, or down in 21s rolling. I need them next time I'm on the blackjack table. So I'm just going to leave it at that right now.
No doubt.
I did want to jump in there as you said that, and this is especially important when you talk about, you know, privilege. And so in this component, we're talking about that Hall of Fame status, you know, prime time, if you would, status in terms of celebrity status to govern that privilege. But you also have what we talk about that a lot of people like hide from is the white privilege. And you talked about with Steve Nash. And, you know, there's a component that you have to look at it. So I think that's a valid critique. But I did want to put on the table that we have seen this before in a lot of ways. People forget because they got short memories. Art Briles, he was a head football coach, and he went from a high school head football coach in the state to a Power 5 school. He went to Baylor.
Right.
Now, he had success. We got to talk about that. You also have, on the women's side, just to let you know that Shiver is not dead, and I'm owning up to it, Sherry Cole. She was a women's basketball coach who won championships in the state of Oklahoma. She got the head women's basketball coaching position at Oklahoma. Now, she turned it into a championship, so kudos to her. She made the most of her opportunity and has Oklahoma, for the most part, in the mix. Obviously, we know how the story at Art Briles turned out, not very strong or positive. But those are some cases where these things do happen. Obviously, it's usually happening to somebody that doesn't look like us. So we tend to forget about it because we're so focused in terms of our capacity, what's going on. But though there is a such thing as privilege, we understand it. And I think this is the example of privilege, but it is something that you have to talk about, all the things that he brings to the table. This is a lifetime, once in a lifetime opportunity for the institution and Prime. Time will tell will it will work out, but we got to understand in regards to there is nothing like this that we've ever seen out there in terms of the magnitude when you really measure Coach Prime, as he likes to talk about, right? Getting this opportunity. You don't see that. So I think in a lot of cases, I have to give VP and Director of Athletics, Ashley Robinson, and the president there a lot of credit. And obviously, if it works out, they're going to get a lot of pats on the back. But he also,
right.
He's brilliant. In fact, could be a career move. You're going to have a lot of people looking at Ashley and the president. He's the acting president now. You know, that's a lot of pressure he put on himself. He's putting himself in a position in regards to, you know, is this a job that he can have long-term and becoming, I don't like to use the term permanent president because nothing is permanent, but he can become the full president, you know, remove the acting title for Ashley. You know, how does this propel him if it works? And so there's a lot of people that have a lot on the line, and we're in the business to second guess. And so we'll see, and time will tell how it comes out.
And Doc, to your point, I have to say, and it's a marvel to kind of look at with Mr. Thomas Hudson and President of Jackson State and Ashley Robinson, the tremendous synergy that they both have in terms of a lot of the things that they're trying to do at Jackson State. And it's something, quite honestly, that the culture has not seen in quite some time. So they are getting a lot of kudos from the fan base, and that is propelling them to do some bigger and better things for Jackson State. So we'll see what happens with, especially with President Mr. Thomas Hudson.
Before we move on, Brian, I got to put this out. Charles, and as a Jackson State alum, I am telling you this as a fellow HBCU alum. Jackson State cannot fail with this. They don't have to succeed and go 11-0, win 20 Celebration Bowls, but they cannot fail with this. There is too much on the line for this experiment, because that's what it is. This is a social experiment that we're going through right now with Jackson State, with Howard, with Alabama State, and some of the moves that are going on. HBCUs are hot. Everything is hot right now. People are flocking back to HBCUs. Jackson State cannot fail at this experiment for the sake of HBCUs in general. As we've seen it go down to just 100 HBCUs from 100 and I want to say it was like 110 when we came into this century back in 2000. We've seen about 10, 12 institutions close. Jackson State cannot fail.
Well, AD. I mean, let's put Alabama State under the microscope as well. They can't fail with Mo Williams. Bally can't fail with Lindsey Hunter. So I mean, it's not just Jackson State. I mean, we have to take a look at the.
But Jackson State is the center of the microscope. Those other institutions that you named, Howard, Alabama State, Mississippi Valley, those are the specks on the outside of the thing that we're looking at in that microscope. Jackson State is now the focus of all HBCU sports right now. They cannot.
If you're Jackson State, you see him smiling. He likes this, so that's not a bad thing.
I love it.
You know,
Yeah.
Without risk, there's no reward. You put that out there. And the fact is I think you're talking about in a lot of ways, as we talk about in the academic setting, is the arms race.
Yeah.
You know, each of these are layers that build upon each other. And the next institution, if they get the opportunity, they like to do that one up. So my point is, I don't think we're quite finished with this yet. And that's what I keep trying to tell everybody. You don't quite know where the tipping point. You were thinking this is the tipping point, but we don't know what's next. We thought FAMU and Bethune, we thought FAMU was the tipping point. Then next thing we knew was Bethune-Cookman. We thought that was the tipping point. Now you had to scare, you know, all these things continue to move. We thought Howard would make a mark was the tipping point. And it keeps moving. That's when you know that you're in, you know, not necessarily a moment, but a movement, it seems like, which is interesting. As you said, a social experiment. I tend to like the not the experiment people, so I call it a case study, but you know, we're being trivial in terms of terminology. But your point is made that this is something, as I did say previously in a different framework, if you would, is that this is something literally, and I'm a wink an eye at soon to be Dr. Charles Bishop at some point there, is these are things that you could actually do for your dissertation study that you can literally live and make a career off of in a lot of ways. So yes, it is, to your point, that important.
Nobody seems to, you know, it's funny in mentioning what you said, Drew, nobody seems to mention Tyrone Wheatley, who came over to Morgan State.
Right.
And what's interesting is I have quietly seen Morgan State make some recruiting noise over the past year. I mean, it hasn't gotten the big splash that Howard or Alabama State, but he has brought in some very highly regarded athletes over to Morgan State's football program. And of course, I mean, now Tyrone Wheatley, you know, he has some cachet, obviously nothing on the level of Deion, but we know the name because he had a strong college career at Michigan, had a good pro career in the NFL, and he came over. I want to mention, I heard Doc mention about the order. You called it the natural order of things, Drew. And what's interesting about the natural order of things is that what I told you earlier was the only thing that bucks that natural order is when you have won. And so Doc brought up Art Briles, who was a winning, successful coach in high school. And the other coach, who's the other coach you just mentioned, Doc, that had won in women's basketball?
Sherry Cole.
Sherry Cole.
C-O-A-L-E. Yes, Sherry
right.
Cole.
So I mean that is sort of when you have shown at a certain level that you can win and you can win consecutively and build a program, you can sort of jump the natural order to where we are today, I think.
True. Very true.
And
Did
I
not
look
Gus
at,
Malzahn do the same thing? Jumping from high school
Yep.
to
Sure did, coming out of Arkansas.
yeah.
Yep.
right. And what you know what
Offensive coordinator at that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. Like, and this is part of what I find interesting as I've listened to people over the past couple of days. People talk about Deion coming to Jackson State as if Deion had not spent a decade coaching. Deion has been coaching for about a decade or so, at least the last 8 years at the high school level, and a few years before that, I believe he was running his youth program with multiple teams. So it's not like he's brand new. Now, he doesn't have the name of colleges and things that other coaches, or, since we started talking about it, T.C. Taylor, of that person's background, but he has been coaching. He won 3 state championships in his league in Texas, which, I mean, Doc, you guys know, I mean, it's competitive as heck down there, regardless of. So
Texas will not take a backseat to anybody in terms of what they do at the high school level. And if you don't believe in terms of talent, I think you can argue that. I think one of the places that is hard to say that Texas is second to none is the facilities, which gives you a lot of indication in terms of just how much they put into understanding what it means to be a sports fan. And that's not just football, that's baseball as well as basketball facilities that are some of the top of the yard in the nation in regards to football facilities. Great point.
Right, and so I want to get into that about some of the reaction from people in a moment, but I want to kind of stay with the sort of things that led up to this and sort of the Jackson State coming to this point where, and just doing a little back research, it's interesting over this past decade. I saw this on First Take where they showed Jackson State's record since 2000. And I think I saw it. They pointed out Jackson State's record since 2000 is 107 and 117. So, I mean, that doesn't sound too good, right? But
take Rick Comedy out of there.
Hold on. That's where I'm going. What they forgot to overlook, or what they overlooked in that 20-year period that they brought up, was the 7 years of the Rick Comedy era, in which I wrote this down, right, for people who forgot. He came in 2006, right? And from 2007 to 2013, he won the SWAC East 6 times. This was like, I feel like this is like the pre-Alcorn State era. This is Jackson. I had forgotten that Jackson State ran the East. I'm sorry, Charles. I'm sorry. It seems like eons ago, but it wasn't just but a decade or so. I'm sorry. Right. Well, there's a point to all this in a second, Charles. So, but for people who aren't familiar, that period of time was probably a golden era of this millennium for Jackson State, was it not? It probably was. You won a SWAC title, went to the SWAC championship 4 years. You win in the East. Life is great. I'm not going. We don't have to get into all of why it ended, but since then, it's been 21 and 40, 17 and 25, 3 different head coaches. A couple of them have been interim coaches, and so that period. Talk a little bit about what the last 7 years have been like. And as you listen to the press conference, introductory press conference from Deion, what was it that he said that was different from what you heard from the 3 previous coaches who had their introductory press conferences?
First and foremost, there's no getting away from the record. The record is what it is, and we talked a little bit about this on our podcast, 1400 Club, Tiger Talk with 1400 Club, in terms of if you were a 6th grader in 2013, you have literally gone your junior high years, middle school years, and high school years without knowing any success for Jackson State's football team, and that's almost mind blowing to kind of think about. You extrapolate that even further, the SWAC championship era from 1999 to now, Jackson State has had very little success. You mentioned the record. Take out the Coach Comedy years, and it's abysmal. So what I heard from Dion is him reaching back and talking about the aura of Jackson State football, which, you know, if you only know Jackson State from the past 7 years, then you don't have a concept of that aura of Jackson State University. From Peyton through the 80s, where Jackson State had a 28-game SWAC winning streak. And that swagger carries over into the 90s, where you won a HBCU national championship in 96. So it's hard to kind of talk about what the last 7 years have been, because it's been a very difficult to watch a Jackson State product, which you are unfamiliar with. And you take a look at some of the reasons of the coaching changes. Harold Jackson, that is definitively alumni looking at, you know, finding somebody who can reach back to an era of Jackson State football that they're familiar with. And that's how Harold Jackson kind of comes in place. That didn't work. You try to get a recruiter or an individual who you thought was extremely strong in recruiting, in Tony Hughes. And I would make the argument that in Mississippi, during that time period when he comes along in 2013, a lot of the athletes in Mississippi were not looking at going to HBCUs. Junior colleges are very prominent in the state of Mississippi. And a lot of athletes look to go through junior colleges to get to SEC schools. So you kind of lose some of that talent even there. So, you know, to listen to what Dion was talking about in terms of why not Jackson State, look at all this history that you have. Why would an athlete not want to come here? And that was something that, you know, resonated with everybody in there. And I, you know, not even joking about it, you had some people in there dabbing their eyes, because it was the perfect tone setter in terms of what everybody wanted to hear.
Doc, care to add anything?
No, I think Charles really sums it up, and it's great that we have somebody that can really put you in the space, because we have a lot of folks that are outside of this, and it's so easy to analyze that from that perspective. But to put the context of that lived experience is second to none. The thing that I would talk about what I experienced in regards to being outside, and obviously, you know me as a SWAC fan, you know, first, obviously, Prairie A&M alumni from undergrad, and then TSU in regards to graduate school, ultimately with the doctorate degree, right? And so I'm a fan of both the Texas schools in regards to seeing their level of success. But as I took back and I just listened, you know, one as a media person, but before I got through it, you know, to be honest with you, I was a fan. It might have been that quick now. Don't get it. But for that short second, you know, I was a fan. I was like, go ahead, Dion. I mean, as you said, he hit all the right notes. And obviously people made fun of it to some degree, but that's because we related to it from the fact that how much he turned it into a congressional Sunday, whether you're talking about a Baptist preacher or a Methodist minister. You know, he went there. And if you from the South, especially from the state of Mississippi, you can say what you want. You know, there's a lot of folks that were raised in the church. And, you know, when you hit those type of tones, you know, we may have some problem with some preachers or some ministers, but that hits home to a lot of folks. People take that religion seriously in terms of you understanding. You start to preaching to them, you're going to get folks raised up in that seat. Yes, sir. What preach? Go preach? Yes. You got, I believe. This is my Jackson State. Like you said, you talk about that history. I've been waiting for somebody to talk about the history for 20 years. We need to get back there. Why did it take so long to get Coach Prime here? This is what we need. So now all those folks that were kind of questioning and doubting, all of a sudden talking about, yeah, hold on, where's my checkbook? You know, we talk about at church. You know, one of the things that we talk about in the conference, writing the checks. Well, there's no better elixir, if you would, to developing a program than people writing checks. Now, you got to win to keep the checks coming in, but oftentimes if you can get enough of them up front, it's going to help you do some things in terms of facilities, which we know young people like, and you add that up with the iconic person that is not intimidated about going after anybody. You know, let's be real with it. A lot of coaches, it's not that they're necessarily intimidated about going after athletes, but they're looking at budget restrictions. Well, Deion, not to say he's going to spend so much of his own money, but budget for Deion is not something that he going to, especially if he thinks his bottom line in terms of him branding himself as a winner. If he got to do some of his own money to get some places, he has options and people that he can call. I mean, on his show, 21st and Prime, not to, you know, put it on the front street, but it is what it is. He did have the commissioner of the NFL. Not that I'm a fan of the NFL or nor the commissioner, but he did have the commissioner that came on and echoing, praying, talking about, yeah, right person. And then he had another guy, the guy called Jerry Jones. I told you I was a big fan earlier. Now I have a lot of issues with Jerry Jones right now and the NFL. But I got to recognize time and space. That's something when you can get, you know, the franchise CEO, because I don't like the other word in regards to that, right? To call your show, when you can get the commissioner of the league to call your show. That says something.
Yeah, definitive. You're right.
Drew, anything to add on that?
Charles, I'm going to respond off of what I'm about to say. Like I said, you take the Rick Comedy era out, you know, Jackson State has not done what the Jackson State standards are. I saw Rick Comedy when he was at Tuskegee. Rick Comedy was here at the same time, in Tuskegee at the same time that I was. And I saw some of the things that made him successful, you know. On the Division II level, Rick Comedy was able to bring in a caliber of player that a lot of the other schools in the SIAC were not able to bring in by bringing in the D1 transfers and everything else into Tuskegee. So I throw this back at you, Charles. And Rick Comedy was a disciple, was a limb of the Billy Joe tree from back in those championship eras at Central State, which I saw Billy Joe do some of the things that he did when I was a student at FAMU. So all that to get to, what do you think separated Rick Comedy? Why was he the one who had some type of success at Jackson State? He was able to find something that the ones before him and the ones after him have not been able to find. What was that? And can Deion take whatever that formula was and adapt it to what he's trying to do?
Rick Comedy was tremendous. Excuse me. Rick Comedy was tremendous at getting talent to come to Jackson State. There is no ifs, ands, and buts about that. One of the things that, you know, you always take a look at, and I think, and it rubbed some people kind of the wrong way, was he was always kind of, how should I say, recruiting for the season in terms of plugging in junior college players. So a lot of people over time kind of started taking a look at, well, you know, the high school talent that he was not so much able to bring in that he was normally pulling a transfer from here, pulling a transfer from there, pulling a junior. And it was something that, to be very honest with you, a lot of the fan base was unfamiliar with. But he won. I think one of the things you kind of take a look at, and I always go back to the 2012 SWAC championship where they lost to Arkansas Pine Bluff. And that was a paradigm shift, if you will, for Rick Comedy, because I just be honest with you, Jackson State fans, they were not going to accept a loss to Arkansas Pine Bluff. That's not taking anything away from Arkansas Pine Bluff. Tremendous team that particular year, but the manner in which they lost, if I'm not mistaken, they were pinned deep in their own territory, huge play, sent it in overtime. They consequently won it in overtime. And Jackson State fans were never able to really come back from that loss in terms of Rick Comedy. So I think that was the kind of the thing that kind of started everything with Rick Comedy.
It's funny that you mentioned Comedy coming off the Billy Joe. that recruiting style sounds very similar to what we saw a little bit from Billy Joe in the late 90s at FAMU, where he had a lot. I mean, we were thirsty to win. So look, let's not even, let's not, I say we, FAMU, were thirsty to win. So no one was making too much of a hay until we made that attempt to go Division I, and we had all these players like Willie Simmons who were scheduled to come into FAMU, and then all of a sudden we lost them all, and then that's when things kind of went south. But that is funny that that same style is what won for FAMU in the late 90s, early 2000s, and then of course you mentioned that similar style, and maybe just comedy, as you talked about, the fact that there was a strong JUCO presence right there in that state. I mean, you know, it kind of makes sense a little bit, you know, obviously a little revisionist history, but kind of makes sense kind of going into that saying, heck, I have this junior college pool here. It's like, you know, it'll be interesting. But Deion's first recruit already is what? A transfer from Mississippi State.
But I would say back then at the time, I think it was the fan base was just unfamiliar with that style of recruiting. And I go back to that coaching tree. And here's the, I think, unique thing about the Jackson State fan base. They are very keen on their own taking over their program. And you always have to caution people and remind them, hey, the greatest coach in Jackson State history is a Tennessee State alum. You know, W.C. Gordon is a Tennessee State alum, but that coaching tree that everybody is familiar with, going from W.C. Gordon to Big Daddy James Carson, we always tend to forget his era in there, but he actually won a Black College National Championship, tremendous team, 94, 95, 96, and it leads into another person off the W.C. Gordon coaching tree, Robert Judge Hughes. And you take a look at Houston Markham, left the W.C. Gordon coaching tree, went to Alabama State and really built their program back up. So Jackson State fans were just very familiar with that coaching tree coming from W.C. Gordon, and that break in that coaching tree starts with James Bell. And for a portion of the fan base, Rick Comedy is not from a W.C. Gordon tree. So he was going to always find that there was never going to be buy-in from that portion of the fan base.
Great context.
Yeah, indeed.
The Creole seasoning is a sodium-free and sugar-free blend that's versatile enough to put on anything. One of the first blends I developed more than 8 years ago, the Creole seasoning has an unmistakable aroma, a bold flavor, and a little heat for character. Every time I open one of these bottles, I hear trumpets and big band music.
You know, the real reason why I went after Comcast and Charter, it didn't have anything to do with my cable networks. It didn't. What happened was a gentleman wanted to do the Black College Sports Network in partnership with the HBCUs, and Comcast did not accept it. And that would have made a lot of money for these black colleges. Absolutely. And it would have educated the Black College Sports Network. This is what he wanted to do. That would have educated a lot of black kids. And when they didn't do that, that's when I came off the bench and said, okay, I'm gonna light you up like a Christmas tree. Okay, that was the real reason why I got into it, was when I saw what happened with the Black College Sports Network, which I don't know. I just knew that these black, all right, I knew that these black colleges were gonna benefit, and these black kids were going to get the education that they deserved and not have to pay.
I want to get into some of the reaction, some positive, well, largely positive, some negative, from within the community. And I guess one of the things that bothered me was hearing the HBCU alums who seemed to have a problem with Deion coming to Jackson State, as if Deion was going to embarrass, and I call it this, I say as if Deion was going to embarrass or or ruin the culture and brand of HBCUs or even Jackson State. And I say even like he was going to come in and do something worse than what people, and I'm not going to say people, I'm going to say presidents and colleges or deans of colleges have done. I mean, scandals, misappropriation of funds, other things like that. I mean, there are people who have led the universities and colleges that have, I mean, if you want to take a poll on who's embarrassed the brand, I mean, I would think those people have embarrassed the brand and embarrassed some schools. There have been board of trustees that have embarrassed some universities. So all of a sudden, here comes Deion, and I don't know if it's because he's an outsider, so to speak, not HBCU. I don't know if it's because of his celebrity status, but I can't get with the negative that went into this, and I'll go specifically into talking one of the more recent reactions, and it was more recently from Bomani Jones, who on his show, on the show Highly Questionable with Dan Le Batard.
But Deion Sanders has typically been in this for Deion Sanders, and if that's what it's going to be, this is going to fail. This job is going to be hard as hell. The institutional problems that you're going to have, the resource shortages and all that stuff, this is not going to be an easy thing for you to do. But if he focuses on the players, then he will be a success. If he focuses on Deion Sanders, he's going to be a failure, and that's going to extend not just to him, but to the school and to HBCUs in general.
And to me, I'm hearing that, and I'm like, that sounds like somebody who has not paid attention to Deion over the last decade. Minimum the last decade. That's somebody who only sees Deion when he was an Atlanta Brave and maybe threw some water on Tim McCarver without even knowing all the backstory of that, you know, I hear that and I think of somebody who is sort of, again, not in the old guard that didn't like Deion's style, his swagger, his braggadocio, the way he self-glossed himself prime time and then backed it up on the field. So I want to go there, and I'll start with you, Doc, and kind of say, what's your thoughts on the reaction, the negative? Because there's been a lot of positive. We can go into that. But there's been a few very interesting negative comments that I'm like, why? Where's that coming from?
So I'll start out in this context. I think some of it is just pure fandom, with especially when you talk about it in the SWAC and in the core HBCU fan base. I think that's just some people that are disappointed that their institution could not pull it off. Because those same fans that have all these questions and say why it's gonna fail would be the same fans at their institution that would have been took the flight up from Houston to Jackson, like said individual on this show, had his questions, you know, critiques, had his concerns, but before the end of the sermon, he was sitting up there talking about, I believe, and he was opening up his checkbook. He couldn't get back quick enough with talking about Kavir don't ask me for no money this month, I done spend it all. I'm like, what? Hold on, man, we got bills to pay. I'm sorry, brother, catch me next month. Deion got all my money. And so some of it I think is just pure hate. But seriously, from a historical perspective, this is something that really concerns me with what I call African Americans, Africans coming out of Africa into this country, and the trepidations that we've had for over 400 years, what many people refer to as self-hate. This is this serious mindset that we have to really consider and look at, that we have the need to destroy our own versus uplift. And we'll try to rationalize it in so many different ways. And sometimes there are some legitimate comments. And as Wally Pip did in terms of HBCU game day, I thought he did it in a manner that you could understand. It was a critique. He didn't really destroy Coach Prime, as he likes to say. He talked about the critique in regards to his concern rightly so, how we kind of started off with T.C. Taylor in regards to he's taking somebody else's opportunity, and how should we look at that? And we were able to have a meaningful conversation about that, and most people that saw that appreciated the way we approached it versus the need that you see in this main state of media, right? Mainstream, if you would allow me to use, for a lack of framing that, where it's this news cycle where you have to be so bombastic, where you almost feel the need that you have to tear somebody down to make your point instead of just being, objective and being a critique, right? And I want to be careful with Bomani Jones, because I think Bomani Jones, if you look over his career, has been a very supportive of HBCUs and critiquing the traditional, what I would call white Eurocentric trope versus a more Black Afrocentric perspective. So, somebody that has that elongated career, they do have that room to make some error. And I think if you really look at the long part of his concern was more in regards to Coach Bob, in regards to him coming into an institution as an othering, if you would, and him not necessarily having a safe vanguard. But after I've gotten to know Jay and some of the things he did, he had a reverence for that program too, that I quickly appreciated. Although similar to Deion, I thought he stepped over some people, and I thought he had some white privilege in terms of how he got that job. And I blame this on the institution more than him. He was smart enough to make sure he leveraged, if he's going to take the job, that he got the resources. And people forget that. And what's dangerous about that, now you have this knight of white horse coming in to save this Black institution because of his winning ways, but we ignore the fact that it was the institutional support that he asked for, to his credit, but they gave that they hadn't given to anybody else that really propelled them to winning. And you see that it's sustained because now they're sustaining that financial support in a different coach, Coach McNair, right? Heir apparent in so many ways appropriate to his name, how he's been able to sustain that lineage, not so much just that he's a great coach, but as I said earlier, it's institutions that win championships, and that the institutional support was there from all corners. So I say all that about Bomani Jones in regards to his critical mistake is when you start doing too many generalizations. And when he started using the name associated with the player, I think that was a dangerous trope that he was using. And when you get in that media cycle, and as you said, if you're not close to that action, because most of his time is being critical in regards to the major sports, right? The professional league and what we refer to as the Power Five, that you can get lost in the nuances. And I believe that's why shows like this are so important, because part of our craft is honing what we refer to as the sporting HBCU diaspora, that HBCU sports culture. So we are immersed in that culture, and we can provide the nuances in the context of how we look at this that other people, even if they are connected to HBCUs, if they've been outside of that circuit, may not necessarily have. And so, again, that's not just being tiresome and saying that people shouldn't have opinions, but when you get on these shows, it's so important that you really critique, you use your media journalism style to really analyze, frameworks of the discourse versus just being bombastic and being noise related because you're trying to get a couple of clicks or more people to your program, which is the financial component of this, which is easier to get in the trope. But again, I'm going to give Bomani Jones, not that he needs it from me, but just for somebody that I will admit that is a bias to his fandom, because I follow him and I like his style that he does, a very intellectual giant. And you can see that from the fact that he started studying the dissertation and went into this field and has done great for him. And then you got to understand his backstory. His father, Dr. Jones at Clark Atlanta University, and he comes by way of Prairie View before that, actually started the doctoral program at Clark Atlanta University in terms of looking at Black policy, urban policy in the community. So he has a lot of people that came off of his tree including Dr. Adams back at Texas Southern University and others across this country. So he comes from a very rich lineage. So, you know, let's be mindful to look at somebody's full picture in regards another guy that I won't name his name in regards to another article that came up. When I went back, I do the backstory research. And when he went into that tired trope about Coach Prime, I was disappointed, but it was not something that I didn't expect because I know what he did. So I quickly went in and said, let me type in schools, because he tried to talk about Prime's previous schools. And I said, let me type in LeBron James in schools. Let me type in Jalen Rose in schools and academy. He didn't talk about any of the things, and they're doing positive. So this is somebody that is not interested in doing deep research on the story to provide two sides, right? This is somebody that had a certain axe to grind and wanted to make a negative point because he hadn't made any positive points on folks that have had institutions that done well. Not to saying that somebody can't fail, we can't be critical about it, but let's take the whole picture and not like just decide to point a finger because you want to get some negative publicity on the story because it's going to get people's attention.
And I'm so glad you mentioned Wally Pitt's comments, because I thought, you know, it's so interesting seeing this space that we're in these days where, and even though I brought this subject up, it's almost like it's so hard to have an opinion that is not the quote unquote mainstream opinion or the popular opinion, because, you know, it comes, the negative comes at you from different places. And it's like, we forget that we are all in the business of sharing our opinions, and we are in the opinion business. And sure, I mean, right now there's no games, so there's no stories to talk about. So, I mean, we can't, you know, we can't critique somebody's action on the field. We're talking about all off the field ancillary stuff. So, you know, having an opinion and being able to sort of back it up a little bit with some context is so important. So I actually even sent Wally a tweet when he had stated something about how he said, "Oh, I guess now I'm becoming a hater or whatever," because I guess there was a lot of response that he was getting from the comments that he made, and I actually appreciate it. I was like, you know what I liked is he did it in a way, as you noted, that really made you think about the hiring process of assistant coaches, and especially Black assistant coaches. You know, and I thought that was, you know, and I was like, yeah, you know, guys who put in the work, and he even mentioned even on the NFL level, which is a big thing because we see a lot of guys who probably should get opportunities that don't. We see it in major FBS football all the time, and so I thought in that respect it was well framed, and I guess, you know, even with Bomani, I appreciate where his heart was. I guess I just sort of, and I will admit, and I told Drew this. What did I tell you, Drew? I've been a Deion fan since the Braves days, the early '90s, and then when I started doing my research on who Deion was, and I learned that he had never smoked or drank as an athlete. And, you know, I became a fan of the person as he was excelling in the sports world. And so he is one of my favorite people that I have never met or gotten close to a meeting. And he's, you know, so I'm an unabashedful Deion fan. So I will put that out there, and I will continue to say that. I used to have and I'm not a Cowboys fan except when I was rooting against my father's Redskins team. But I used to have
hey, that's the Washington franchise now. Be careful.
I'm sorry. The Washington football team. I'm sorry. But I used to have, when I was small enough to wear jerseys, I had a 21 Sanders jersey. That was the jersey that I had when he was with the Cowboys. So, Drew, I'm gonna come over to you. What's your take on some of the reactions that you've seen, positive, negative? You can go either way with it.
Can you do me a favor, Brian? Can you repeat that Bomani Jones paraphrase or phrase that he used? Do you have that in front of you?
So
Because I don't want to get this wrong when I say this.
Yeah, so in short, basically, and I'm just reading from the article from the website that I'm looking at. He declared Sanders would quote unquote fail in his new job if he focuses on himself and not the players. And I think that's what McCoy was saying.
Stop right there. On the surface, Brian, that's a true statement. But that's also true for you in your job. That's true for Doc in his job. That's true for Charles in his job. That's true for me in my job. On the surface, that is a true statement. But when you talk about Deion Sanders, the person, you know, to use a quote of somebody rumored to be on his coaching staff, they hate to love me. Y'all know what I'm talking about when I say that. Y'all had to think about it for a minute.
That was good. That was good, Drew.
That was good.
Yeah, but when you think about who, not prime time, who Deion Sanders, the person is, who I saw just missed him in Tallahassee by a few months. He was leaving when I was coming, but this is a person who transformed multiple things. They're saying he's gonna fail because he does not know how to manage his time. But this is the same person who played college football at a very high level. If we want to take it back to high school, was an all-state basketball player in the state of Florida.
3-sport athlete.
4-sport, bro.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot track. Yes, sir.
Exactly, 4 sports.
Yes.
Played baseball, got drafted while he was still playing football at Florida State by the New York Yankees organization. Matter of fact, he went and played minor league baseball and then came back and played college football another year between his junior and his senior year. And oh, by the way, was the third leg in the 4x100 and used to walk people down. And there were days when he would go from the track to the baseball field. So what, he can't manage his time? I mean, I'm serious. But you take that, and then you take what he did on the business side. For a cornerback, an afterthought, to become the highest paid player on the defensive side of the ball, ultimately the highest paid player in the game. Who in the hell paid the cornerback before Deion Sanders? Who in the hell paid the defensive back? Lawrence Taylor, the best player in the game during the 80s, still was not paid more than the quarterback. Your cornerback made more than the quarterback at one point in time because of Deion Sanders. He branded himself. If you remember when he was coming out of Florida State, he had to have 2 seats on the plane. One for himself and one for the jury. Y'all remember that story? You know, Dr. DeWills already talked about what he did with Nike. Deion talked about, if you heard it on his 21st and Prime podcast, that Pepsi commercial. Is it going to be baseball or football? It's going to be both. Is it going to be 15 million? It's going to be 20 million? It's going to be both. A lot of that stuff was true. He was able to do stuff that nobody else would do. He was an all-star in football. And if he would have concentrated on baseball full time, he would have been an all-star. He was damn close to being an all-star in baseball. Played in the World Series and in the football game in the same day. Played in the World Series and played in the Super Bowl. And y'all worried about, is this man going to succeed? Is he going to put in the time?
Say it like that.
I give the man credit because apparently he's had coaching opportunities for the last 8 to 10 years, but he decided he wanted to be dad first. Now that he has all of his other children out the house, but his youngest, who probably is going to be decommitting real soon, but we'll wait and see on that. You know,
cross for that one. You know,
yeah, nice little. Yeah. He
was a man. He raised his kid, and trust me, most of the time during those years of the time where he needed to be home and be dad, did not need to be on the road. Coaches spending 80, 90, 100 hours a week in the football coach's office. Now, the other young men, you haven't heard any scandals with them. You haven't heard about them doing anything crazy while they're in college or while they've left the nest. And you've got that one last one that's on his way out the nest. Yeah, like he said, the time is right. So I'll turn to CB on that.
Great point, AD, when you talk about all those framing. As I told the story, that people realize in the 90s, people forget when you talk about the two icons, Michael Jordan in the sport of basketball for the NBA, and you had Deion for the NFL. He leveraged the deal with Jerry Jones. I already told you my thoughts on that. But think about this. They literally changed the industry in multiple ways in terms of being the highest paid, right? The branding side of it. He had Jerry Jones go create a deal that signed PepsiCo and Nike. When they shoot the commercial, you have the PepsiCo driving them in there on the field. You have the Nike star around it. The NFL had to come back and set up rules and tell Jerry Jones, you can't do that. He had them changing the whole rules.
Yeah.
It's impossible to think about just how much credit that people want to overlook in terms if you're just not a fan because you might not like some braggadociousness. And it's fair to critique that, but don't lose your mind and lose sight about what the talent and what he was able to do, not just on the field, but transcend that in such a way that you bring out perfectly that I think is an important context for us to understand in terms of understanding the whole Deion Sanders, the whole Coach Prime in terms of what that looks like.
And I guess
nobody is perfect. The last person we talked about that was perfect, if you're a Christian and you believe in that framework, was crucified, right?
2,000 years.
So to pull out somebody's fault, especially if his only fault is in terms of what he did with a school, when it looks like he had the right intentions, he may have had the wrong people running it.
Mm-hmm.
But he was trying to develop a school in terms of educating young people and get them out of some of the situations that we complain about. We complain about the educational system in this country, which he was trying to say, let me do my part. Now we mad because he didn't do it right.
Yeah.
Heck, y'all get that mad at these other folks in the system that ain't doing it right. So again, it goes back to some of that self is that self-critique in regards to us not being able to really handle Black institutional success and empowerment in individual African-American leadership. We have been so poisoned at the fruit of the tree for so long that we question ourselves even when we should be able to look at giving an opportunity. We'll question ourselves before we'll question somebody else.
And my final point before I turn it over to Charles, I mentioned all those different things that he was doing simultaneously to say, hey, you know, they talk about this. He's still gonna keep his deal with Barstool Sports. We all know how we may feel individually about Barstool Sports, but
that's right. Can't stand.
He does have a contract with them right now. He's got other endorsements. You know, he's got other businesses going on. He's got his deal with Under Armour and other podcasts that he's doing. He's making all these appearances on TV right now. And oh, by the way, he's still coaching high school football and gonna wind up coaching. Sooner or later, he's gonna be on campus. Real estate is getting ready to take a increase in value in Jackson, Tennessee. Jackson, Mississippi. there because he's probably going to be looking for a house for him and about 8 other people. So,
He's already put the call out on Twitter from what I saw.
I'll guarantee you, Zillow was hot right now.
And that's exactly where people were throwing stuff up. I mean, there's some beautiful homes in Jackson that were coming up on Zillow. They were like $1 million homes. I'm like, Zillow's got $1 million homes? That's crazy.
Yeah, but my point is, anything that this man has said he wants to go do, dedicated to it, be it the highest paid player, be it a 2-sport athlete, whatever the case is, he succeeded more times than he has failed. So, I'm going to lean on the side of him succeeding with this venture also. As long as he goes 10-1 every year, and every HBCU person knows who they want their one loss to be. Whoever you root for, there's only one person on this panel who wants him to go 11-0, and that's the man with the headphones on.
Yes, indeed. But to put a bow on everything you guys are saying, I think we see it all the time in sports where we perceive somebody as a self-indulgent athlete, and we tend to apply that to someone like Deion, who's tremendously business astute, master marketer, a walking TED Talk, if you will. But we still tend to think of him in the of the video, all about the money, Yeah. So I mean, and we tend to think of him in those terms, the jewelry, the this, that, and the other. And there was even a point at the press conference where I kind of giggled. As sincere as he was, he still had a media moment when he opened up his jacket and showed the Jackson State on the inside of it. So it was, and he said, "Hey, this is for the media," So so if you just jump in on that snippet, you'll be like, "Oh, there he is again. Look at him promote himself." But he was very sincere in terms of his reverence for not just Jackson State, but the HBCU community as a whole. So.
And Charles, to that point, because I don't want to lose that for the people that may not have seen that context, his comments was trying to connect, as you said, with the fan base. He said, I don't just have Jackson State logo and stuff like that. I'm Jackson State inside out.
Right.
So in terms of the brilliance and the branding that we talked about, whether you like it or not, is understanding how do you connect with people. And who was he trying to connect to at that time? He was not connecting to everybody at HBCU. He wasn't trying to connect with that. We happened to be there to watch it. And he brought all the eyes to it, to Jackson State. Now everybody talking about Jackson State University. So you got some folks out there while y'all tripping. And think about it, they going to Jackson State University saying, what kind of degrees they got over there?
Mm.
They got a graduate program over there?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's right. They got that executive PhD program in higher education. Maybe I could consider that now. I was always thinking about doing that PhD. And now, Jackson State, let me go read a little more about that. They talking about that, that meteorology program they got on there, one of the few HBCU programs out there with it, right? PhD in business, one of the few, 2 out there that I know of in terms of Morgan State off the top of my head that have PhD in business programs out there, right? You talking about some of those undergraduate programs at Jackson State University. Not that I want to be a walking, talking billboard for Jackson State University. But
you're doing a doggone good job.
People need to understand that those things, while you are frustrating all these other folks are paying attention and say, I want to go, let me go, what is all this about Jackson State University? I didn't realize it. Let me go check this out on the serious tip.
We're getting close to wrapping this up, guys. So look, I want to start this last couple questions. I'll start with Charles. And as we've seen, and we may have already answered this. So if in the comments or discussion that you've already given an example, but it's got me thinking from everything we've seen over the last 48 hours, the attention that Jackson State has received nationally from Good Morning, from every network, sports radio network, national media 24/7 like CNN, local, regional networks, all sorts of media personalities from within the sports community, well respected, white, black, male, female. Can you recall seeing this in any other kind of in any other sport? I mean, I don't know whether, I just want to say whether in coaching or maybe a free agent coming to your city. I mean, can you recall anything like this? And I'm not just talking on the HBC level. It's great if you can. We'll start with Charles and then we'll come around. I know AD just thought of one, so I'm gonna start with you, Charles.
Well, I will say Jackson State in a manner got slightly prepared for this, because if you remember, they just went through Snacks Mania.
Okay, yeah.
They literally just went through a viral moment where this young man is on talk shows, on late night talk shows, and eventually he wins an ESPY. You know, so they at least got a snapshot of what this next however long it's going to be, a snapshot in terms of what it's going to look like with dealing with snacks. So that's one that immediately comes to mind. But beyond that, you know, and maybe when Jackson State had, you know, 2 first rounders, you know, Walter Payton and Robert Brazile drafted it, but it was a different time. It was 1970. So, you know, social media. So it's hard to kind of, you know, say if there's been another time that I can think of, because there isn't anything that, you know, pops in my head in terms of something of this magnitude.
What about you, Doc?
Yeah, it's hard for me to really think of something that really fits this situation when you talk about from an institutional perspective, matching up with, you know, with a mega brand, mega star. You know, you think about the LeBron James when he made a decision, the first decision to go to Miami, in terms of just how much publicity he had, and that was at the beginning of it. And again, you're talking about a mega star. In regards to that. But when you talk about the modern time, the social media, the multi-layers of multimedia and broadcasting in this current environment, when you add all those layers on it, I can't think of anything like this when you talk about such a, from an institutional perspective. It's different than when you're talking about, as you said, a franchise and a transcendent player. You know, that's different. Those are professional teams. They also have own mega brands in themselves. LeBron James choosing to go to the Lakers, right? The Los Angeles Clippers and what they were able to get done, that magnitude. But again, that's major franchises, you know, in multiple sports when you look at it in this magnitude. But this you're talking about at the college level, matching up with a major star, and so that's what makes it so unique in this situation. So I'm not sure if I can really think of anything, you know, off the top of my head at this point that says, hey, I would connect it this far. So I'm really anticipating to hear what AD has to say in regards to the connection that he's going to make.
Well, you kind of hit on mine a little bit, but I'm going to bring mine a little bit full circle. Let's think about Deion. Has not suited up in 20 years. And still is making headlines on every form of media that's out there. There's only one other person who hasn't put on the uniform in damn near 20 years that can say that. And that's Michael Jordan.
Michael Jordan, yep.
Yeah. Deion can, just like Jordan, still sell the shoes and the apparel. Anything that Deion endorses, he is still selling. That's probably, and we just happen to grow up during arguably one of the greatest eras in sports in the 80s, in the late 70s, early 80s, into the 90s. We saw Lawrence Taylor. We saw Michael Jordan. We saw the end of Reggie Jackson. We saw Deion Sanders. You know, we saw some great players, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird. We saw some great players during those times. But there have been very few people who post their career like a Magic Johnson, like a Michael Jordan, like a Deion Sanders, who have been able to continue to transform the business world after they no longer play sports. You brought up LeBron James. That is probably the only thing that has drawn the media attention, both positive and negative, that I have seen within the last 10 years, especially in this modern age of Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and everything else. When LeBron made that decision to leave Cleveland and go to Miami, not when he went back to Cleveland, not when he went to LA, but that first decision and everything that revolved around that first decision, that's probably the only other thing that has gotten this much attention, this much dissection of what's going on, what is he gonna do. And that summer after LeBron, Chris Bosh, and D Wade, not one, not two, not three. We all remember the
Epic. That was one of the great pep rallies. Deion get a good pep rally. That was an epic pep rally. I don't care what you say. That was an epic pep rally.
Hey,
yeah, it was.
Hey, just like this was an epic press conference.
Yes.
And remember the scrutiny, the remainder of that summer, and into that next year that those three received. It's going to be the same thing for Jackson State right now. This next year is going to be a similar situation. Look back at the Miami Heat. What was it, 2013, 2010? Whatever year that was, 2010, I think it was. 2010.
Yeah, 2010.
Let's see how many parallels between that and what's happening with Deion and Jackson State right now. That is the only thing that I could even contemplate that we're going to be able to compare this to, because it's on that magnitude, especially for us in the HBCU community.
Final thought, fellas. We've talked about. I think we all are in agreement that there is going to be a certain level of success for Deion and for Jackson State. I think we all agree to what levels we'll be interested to see. What do you think is the biggest area of need and or concern that faces Coach Prime as he takes over as the head coach? Start with
their win-loss record is what it is. They're looking up at Alcorn right now. Alcorn are Swacky's champs. Alabama A&M, they're an up-and-coming team with Connell Maynard. Akil Glass is one of the top quarterbacks in the conference. Alabama State is in the mix. Now, you got Florida A&M and Bethune-Cookman over there on the SWAC East. They've lost 7 in a row to Southern. Grambling is always a bugaboo for Jackson State. So the reality of it is they've got to upgrade. They've got to get some talent in there. They've got to bring in some players, and Deion has mentioned, I'm looking for playmakers. I'm looking for game changers. I'm looking for guys who want to get to the NFL. So the win-loss record.
He said, I'm looking for dogs.
Yeah, I'm looking for dogs. So the win-loss record is what it is. So Jackson State has quite a bit of work in terms of getting back out on the recruiting trail. One of the things that we kind of looked at is you don't hear Jackson State's name even in the top 10 of the HBCU recruiting circles. So in terms of going out and getting talent. So they've got to bring some guys in that can make some plays.
Doc, what about you?
I'm going to say facilities, and I want people to understand when I say facilities, I'm not talking about the stadium at 60,000. They can provide some equalization in regards to that because they can put 30,000 in there and don't let him start winning a couple of games in this spring, and you're going to start seeing that thing pack up 50, 55, 60,000 if they get the right opponent in there, i.e. Southern. In regards to what it looks like in terms of that rivalry, right? And that's not to mention at some point they're going to bring FAMU in there. Boy, those recruiting battles between the state of Mississippi and the state of Florida, the intersectionality when you talk about Willie Simmons coming over from Mississippi, offensive coordinator at Alcorn, and obviously Coach Prime being from Florida, right there out of Tallahassee with Florida State in terms of those connections. They already got into some good prime jousting going back and forth, so it's going to be interesting. But I'm talking about facilities in terms of what gets kids eyeballs. You know, how quick can they transform that facilities in terms of the weight room? How quick can they make some of the nuanced things in terms of nutritional components? And these are things that I've heard that they are doing, plan on doing, and will likely get done. But my question is just how fast that will happen. And obviously, the faster you're going to get that when you add in some facilities, even if it's just the design of these facilities, because people sell hope and a dream. That's what recruiting is all about. And you add in the magnitude of Coach Prime in terms of what he can do in terms of sitting into houses that most people can't get into. When he talks about that and the culture, his experience in terms of the pros and cons of being at a Power 5 school, his ability to negotiate that space of saying, man, I tell you not only what it takes to be in the NFL, I can tell you how to stay in the NFL and what it's going to need to be a transcendent player in regards to your work ethic. Because one thing that people miss on Deion Sanders, I would say, in regards to when he was at his craft, people often talk about his talent, which is something that we should talk about, AD, as you broke down in a very good process. But people talk about his peers now, talk about how he dissected the film, his ability to be in the lab, if you would allow me to talk about inside the HBCU sports lab, but his lab in terms of breaking the film down, right? Studying about his craft, the way that he practiced. You know, his counterpart on the other side of the ball, right? The great 88 of the Dallas Cowboys, Charles, Michael Irvin, talked about some of his greatest competition was in the practice field against Deion when they were just going head to head. So you're talking about somebody that worked at his craft at a level that most people don't give him credit for. And so there are the nuances that he can talk to people talking about. There's no second framework about not just talking about your 3-star, 4-star, 5-star, but how you're going to work at your craft to get to where you want to go, whether that is on the field or off the field in life, as he talked about. So again, my point is facilities.
Drew, what about you?
Expectation.
Okay.
Deion's almost in a no-win situation. Let's say it takes him 3 years to win the SWAC East or the SWAC championship. There are going to be people who say he should have done it in 2. If he wins it in 2 years, there are going to be people who say he should have done it his first year. Even if he wins it his first year, you didn't have enough 3 stars. You didn't have enough 4 stars. You didn't have enough 5 stars. Expectation is almost a no-win situation for Deion. Let's say worst case scenario, Jackson State gives him 5 years. He only goes 500 one time. But Jackson State gets those facilities that Doc is talking about and gets some of the other ancillary things. You know, is Deion a failure? Or did Jackson State get what they needed to get out of it? And did Deion get what he needed to get out of it? Expectation is going to be that thing. You know, the man's name is Deion Sanders, not Jesus Christ. He's not a miracle worker. Like Charles said, the record is what the record is, and there's a reason why the record is what the record is. Deion is not going to be able to correct this overnight. And so many people are going to expect him to do it overnight. He's human. He's going to need time. I don't care how many years of experience coaches he's going to bring in. He is going to need time to get this right. Are people going to give him the time that he needs? Are they going to give him the leeway that he needs? And at the same time, if he's going too far, Jackson State has a standard. If they think he's going too far, Are they going to rein him back in? Or will they rein him back in too much? These are just different things that are going to be interesting to look at and see what are going to be the expectations, and can he meet them?
Right. I will conclude mine with his coaching staff, because 2021, the season of prime, will be a very interesting year where not only are you playing 3 months in the spring with 2 months of preparation, probably 2.5 months of preparation, but then you have a very short summer, and then it's turn around and get ready for the fall. So you're talking 3, 4, 7 months of game action when normally you may only play 4 months in a normal year. So the kind of coaches, and we've heard that Deion has already, even though the reports of who his coaches are has been disputed, he says he already has them ready. I just hope that these coaches are teachers, who can teach quickly on the fly, are great communicators, and are really invested in this short window, because like you said, they're going to come in and, hey, you got to work 2.5 months and get ready for that spring season, and then it's turn around with a short summer. I don't even know if you get a short summer break, maybe a week or two, and then, hey, we gotta come back and
get Christmas break and do it again.
Yeah, we got a short little window of a break, and then we got to get ready for the fall season. So it's an unprecedented time for a new coach. While everybody else in the SWAC, if I'm not mistaken, has been preparing over these 4 months of the fall, actually 6 months from the time that summer hit all the way until December, they've been preparing for what they're going to do in the spring. So Jackson State is starting last man in the race. It'll be interesting to see how fast Deion and his coaching staff can catch up to the rest of the pack. That's going to be the interesting part.
Can he hawk him down like he was third leg on that 4x1?
There you go. That's exactly what I'm talking about right there. All right, guys. Hey, look, we appreciate the group chat joining us for this. Let's make sure to give out the plugs, because we've got, not only we got Dr. Cavill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab, but Charles Bishop is a part of the Tiger Talk podcast with the 1400 Club. So Charles, let the people know about that show and where they can reach out to you, and then Doc, we'll let you do the plugs for the Sports Lab.
Sure thing. I co-host Tiger Talk with 1400 Club with my co-hosts Christopher Darrell Neely and Corey Collins. We talk all things Jackson State athletics in terms of not just the athletics parts, but the university part as well. And what we try to do is bridge the older generation with the newer generation and really bring and drive the narrative of Jackson State athletics. So you can catch us on Spotify, all social media outlets in terms of that. But we try to put out a show at least 1 or 2 a week in terms of podcasts. So you can always go to Spotify and find us. It's Tiger Talk with the 1400 Club.
And I gotta admit, Charles, let me really know, I love the phrase, the soft bigotry of low expectations. I have that in quotes. And whenever I use it, now that I know that it's Charles, I will reference him and give him credit for that every time.
No doubt.
Because that was so beautifully said. I was excited listening to it. I had a tiger fist pump when I said that. I said that is what it is. But anyway, so great show. I enjoyed listening to you guys. And learning about Jackson State and everything you guys are doing. So
Sure thing. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, Doc, fire away.
Certainly. Check us out. When I say us, that's Mike Washington and Charles Bishop on Dr. Cavill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Every Tuesday, we start at 6 o'clock Standard Time, and you can check it out. We usually go at least an hour, and sometimes if we have a special guest, which may drop in, could be Rob Calloway of the Sports Report or AD Drew. Don't be surprised if we sneak Brian Fulford in there as well, better known as the doc around these parts. So check us out, as you never know who's going to join us in the lab. That's Dr. Ville's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop every Tuesday from 6 o'clock Central Standard Time. You can check us out live on 12:30 a.m. KSOH and Houston, Texas. You can do it on Facebook Live, as well as if you can't catch it live, go check us out on YouTube. Join it so we can get those numbers up. We appreciate that as well on Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. And follow us on our social media platforms. That's me individually, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil. If you want to get all this kind of news all the time, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I'm always giving this information and plugging these individuals because they have all the news you need to know from every perspective when you want to talk about HBCU sports. And if you can't catch it live, check me out on podcast. That's Spreaker. Dr. Ville's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Again, on all the different podcasts available. If you can't catch it live, you can check that out. Again, on Twitter, you can also follow us on Inside the HBCU Sports Lab 1 as well. Thank you for that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, two shows that definitely you got to add to the rotation. Hopefully, if you're watching us, you got us on subscribe, but make sure you get those other shows, on subscribe, and then make sure you get those alerts so that you can always see what's going on. All right, Drew, I'll let you give the plugs for us. You good with that?
No, I'm not. You know you can rattle those things off your lips faster than myself. But I am gonna make my one last quick final plug. Census is due September 30th. If you have not filled it out, I've ended every show like this month. Please go out and fill your census. There's too much money on the line for your community and mine if you do not complete your census. Stand up, be counted.
That's AD Drew. You can find him on Twitter at BCSN Drew. And of course, we are the Sports Wrap, a part of the Black College Sports Network and the Jericho Broadcast Networks. We want to remind you, go download our app. We are on the Jericho Broadcast Networks app, which is you can go to Google and Apple stores, MyJBN, just do that search, or MyBCSN. Every time we drop a show, every time the Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab show goes on, you get an alert letting you know that the show is on. And then wherever you are, however you want to go listen to it, on all the different platforms, you can go do that. Follow the Black College Sports Network on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at MyBCSN #1. And of course, you can find our podcast. Just search MyBCSN or BCSN Sports Wrap, rather. Go find us wherever you listen to podcasts. We're everywhere except iHeart. We're still working on that, but everywhere else that you've heard all the other shows here, you can go download us. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. For our guest today, help me out, name real quick. I forgot already.
Royal Maxwell.
Huh?
Royal Maxwell.
Royal Maxwell, thank you. I got so many names in my head. Thank you to Royal Maxwell for joining us today. For Charles Bishop, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, AD Drew, I'm Brian Fulford. Thank you. Peace out. Congratulations, Tiger Nation. You guys are in prime time, ready to roll in 2021.
Now let's put the baby to bed and put a bow on it. I'll holler.
But my beats, they are hard.